One of the most well-known battles in eastern Kentucky happened in the township of Leatherwood, Kentucky. This was truly a battle that was brother against brother. Though it only lasted 20 minutes, it would leave a lasting impact on the region. As one of the few well-known battles that took place in the Appalachian region, it is one of the best documented of all the conflicts that took place during the Civil War in that area. Between the years of April 12, 1861 and May 9, 1865, the war between the states raged. The peace of the Appalachian Mountains shattered. Brother took up arms against his brother. We at Kentucky, Tennessee Living will cover a lot of Civil War battles that took place in Kentucky and Tennessee. We do so with the hope that we have learned the lessons that was taught during that time our nation was split, and that we shall never see another time like this again. All aboard the Kentucky, Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up the time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. On the Confederate side, sometime in September 1862, Captain Ben E. Caudill of Company F, 5th Kentucky Infantry, made a formal request of General Humphrey to form a regiment of mounted infantry comprised of men from eastern Kentucky. After much thought, permission was granted, and Caudill was granted leave to muster men for the regiment. Humphrey surmised that since many of the men in Company F would leave due to the enlistment term ending that October, that he would grant the request, hoping that the men would re-enlist with Caudill. Caudill set up an enlistment station in Whitesburg, Kentucky, calling the new regiment the 10th Kentucky Mounted Rifles. The regiment would be nicknamed Caudill's Army, as most of the men who joined were related to Ben Caudill. The biggest draw was that the regiment would be on horseback instead of marching everywhere. The 10th Kentucky Mounted Rifles would train on the property of Captain Caudill's father, John A. Caudill, that was located near Sand Lick Creek and North Fork of the Kentucky River. Within a few weeks, Captain Caudill was promoted to colonel, and his regiment had its first assignment guarding the salt works in Brashearsville, now Cornettsville, in Perry County. The works was owned and operated by Caudill's uncle, Robert S. Brashear. This was a very important assignment, as salt was important to both armies. It was the only way to preserve meat during the war. Caudill split his regiment into two divisions. Company A, under the command of Captain David J. Caudill, Ben Caudill's brother, was sent to set up a new camp in Little Leatherwood, a short distance from the salt wells. Around 100 men were in this division and set up temporary huts and other shelters. They were quickly placed, and the men began to forage the countryside for food. Company B remained in Whitesburg, Kentucky, under the command of Colonel Ben Caudill. They still trained at the home of John A. Caudill, but were in Whitesburg to gather and train more recruits and help form more companies. On the Union side, on September 5, 1862, the Kentucky legislature passed a bill that had authorized the formation of the Home Guard units. The Union-leaning residents of Poor Fork, Harlan County, Kentucky, formed the 1st Harlem Battalion of Kentucky State Guards, known locally as the Harlem Battalion. It would be under the leadership of Major Benjamin F. Blankenship. This battalion was formed to protect local residents from bushwhackers, as it was recognized as a home guard on September 13th. The unit mostly comprised of men from Harlan, Letcher, Wise, Perry, and Buchanan counties of Kentucky and Virginia. The call to join the Union. While the newly formed Harlem Battalion was in training, Major Blankenship got word that a group of men from Leatherwood wanted to sign up. However, they requested a representative from the battalion to come see them. Because of his duties, Blankenship could not go himself. Instead, he sent Captain George Morgan, along with his 15 men of Company A and 25 men from Company B, to assist him with this task. Morgan gathered up the best men from each of the companies and had each soldier equipped with 40 rounds of ammunition in their cartridge box and as much provisions as they could carry in their haversacks with them. Because of the rough mountain terrain that they would have to travel over, Morgan knew that the men had to travel as light as possible. The fight begins. On October 19, 1862, Captain Morgan and his men set out from Harlan County towards Leatherwood. On their way to their destination, they came across a group of home guards. The men informed Captain Morgan that there was a company of Confederate cavalry that were camped near Little Leatherwood and were guarding the salt wells near their location. The home guards asked Morgan and his men to join them so that they could attack Cottle and his men. Under absolute silence, the men followed the home guards down the mountain slope so that they could take up their positions. The plan that Clabe Jones and Captain Morgan came up with was to drive the rebels out of Perry County. On their way, they came across a group of rebels that was trying to steal watermelons from a handicapped farmer. The Union soldiers took their positions across a creek from the guards and opened fire. The volley of shots did not panic the rebels as they had been shot at before. Instead, they quickly found places to take cover and return fire. A battle ensued and lasted 20 minutes. One man on each side was killed and several men were wounded in the battle. While the shots were being fired, Cottle heard the commotion from his position, but at first he thought that the men from his company were hunting. After a few moments, the realization of what was happening hit him. He gathered several of his men and quickly headed toward the melee, leaving the rest of the men behind to guard the horses and camp. The men at the battlefield were about to give up and run when Cottle and his men made their appearance. This encouraged the rebels to keep on fighting. For several minutes there was an exchange of bullets. Clabe Jones then shot Captain Jesse Cottle in the backside. The wounding of Cottle caused Lieutenant George Hogg to order an immediate retreat. There were several soldiers who remained on the battlefield covering their retreating comrades with volleys of lead until they returned with horses for the men to escape. With the wounded and dying laid across horseback, the rebels then fled for the safety of Whitesburg, Kentucky. There, they treated their wounded and buried one soldier who had died. Captain David Cottle would be later promoted to Lieutenant Colonel of the 10th Kentucky. The Union had won the battle and the rebels had fled the camp. Captain Morgan then ordered the men to cautiously take the camp, as there might have been other men waiting to ambush the battalion. The men met no opposition. The men then began to see what they could find as spoils of war. There are stories that the Union was able to confiscate the watermelons that the rebels had tried to steal, as well as a 50-pound pound of cornbread that they were making out of one of the salt kettles. The Union remained at the camp until dawn the next day, at which they left the camp and returned to Norfolk, Kentucky. Since Cottle would most likely bring back his army to take back the salt wells, the Union force was not strong enough to resist the return. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Civil War battles. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.